Good evening, and thank you for attending another Northshire Presents virtual event. I'm Rachel Person, Event Director for Northshire Bookstore, with store locations in Saratoga Springs, New York, and Manchester Center, Vermont. Before we get started, a couple of quick notes. Thank you so much for your support of independent bookselling. We could not do events like this one without the incredible loyalty and support of customers like you, so thank you so very, very much for that. Then a logistical note. Please use the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you have this evening. We'll have time for questions at the end of the night, so please post your questions there at any point, and I will save them up and I will pose them for you a little bit later on. I'm so very pleased to get to introduce Carmen Boullosa this evening, here to celebrate the United States publication of her novel, The Book of Eve. She is one of Mexico's leading novelists, poets, and playwrights, and has published over a dozen novels. She's received numerous prizes and honors, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, and is a distinguished lecturer at the City College of New York. Her books have been translated into Italian, Dutch, German, French, Portuguese, Chinese, and Russian, and her other novels translated into English include Before, Heavens on Earth, and The Book of Anna. She will be in conversation this evening with translator Samantha Schnee. She is the founding editor of Words Without Borders. Her translation of Boullosa's Texas, The Great Theft was shortlisted for the PEN America Translation Prize. In addition to her translation of The Book of Eve, she also translated Boullosa's The Book of Anna. Please join me in welcoming them both to our screens this evening.
So hello, I'm very happy to be here with Samantha Schnee and with you and at an independent bookstore. It's so important to still have, like Northshire Bookstore, it's so important to have stores that are not being managed and sold by people who doesn't care about books, but they think that it's only a product. It's not a product. A book is a book. And obviously it's sold and bought, but a book is a book. So my name is Carmen Boullosa. As we have heard, we are talking about the Book of Eve, or we are going to start talking about the Book of Eve. I'm in fact now the distinguished lecturer at Macaulay Honors College of CUNY. I always appear like I'm still at City College, but that was long ago. That happens to people my age. We keep our records like if they were fresh. But in fact, I am at Macaulay Honors College. So I'm going to try to explain a bit what's the Book of Eve. The Book of Eve is a novel where Eve tells her version of what happened in the Genesis. She goes from the beginning till Babel, and she tells us her own version that is pretty different from the one we all knew before. She doesn't like the former one. She doesn't think she's just a piece of a man. She doesn't think she did something wrong. She doesn't think that we were punished because we came to the earth. She thinks the other way around. She loves the planet. She loves the earth. She loves being alive here. And all the plot changes. I am a little bit distracted. Please pardon me. I got distracted by the aspect of the bookstore. I thought, oh gosh, I wish Samantha and me were there. And those were my thoughts. And then my mind went like wobbly, like all over. But I'm back here. I am already in the bookstore, in Northshire's bookstore with Samantha Schnee, and I've told you in a very short version what's the novel about. Now, the way the novel is built, most of the novel is told by Eve herself in different chapters. Chapters is not the way, but it has more like the construction of the Bible. Books and versions happen to be one after the other one. When Eve talks and takes a breath, she breathes deep, somebody else gives happens frequently that somebody else gives a different version of the facts inside the book. Most probably you are going to encounter the voices of her daughters, because an Eve like her that's full of life, and it's not like the Eve that is painted by tradition, that is completely bland, unable to take decisions except one that brings a ruin, and she's been made, and all her reason of being is to make Adam happy and satisfy Adam, satisfy the ones around, take care of them. That is her duty. Even when she has babies, she's going to suffer. So her life is really something. But the Eve of the book is very different. She's full of energy. She likes being alive in the world. She has imagination. She loves to act and invent and create. And her daughters are like her daughters. They have to say, no, mother, you are wrong. We think differently. This was this way. So we listen mostly to their versions. But we also, through Eve's words, we know how Adam has built another version of the facts. And that version is the one that tradition has passed on and on to all of us. And that voice of Adam sometimes appears, not frequently. He says, no, you are wrong. Even though we have seen Eve saying he's building another story, he finds the way to come in. His sons, the male sons, also come in. Their life is going to be very different. Also, why? Because one is a gardener. He loves dealing with the plants. That's what he brings to the table. That's what they eat. And that's the older one, that's Cain. And the other one enslaves animals and kills them and brings their dead meat to their kitchen and to the table. So he has another temperament, another character, and we are going to see how the violence in which he has grown, because Eve has given that second boy of hers to Adam to see if he then is in better mood, because he's all the time furious and he's not very happy with what's happening. He wanted to be still at the Eden. He didn't want to be on, he doesn't want to be here. He wants to be up there. Abel is like a son of Adam. And he has, with the rancor of the father, the fury of the father, he also has violence in his heart. And we are going to see a scene of domestic violence in the book. We are going to see how violence is nourished and bred by education too. So that's in short what I would say today about the book. But Samantha, what's the book for you?
Well, certainly the book is all that. And I think as a translator, I bring my own interpretation to the reading as a reader, as every reader does. And I think the things that really stand out in the Book of Eve for me are its sensuousness, not only of the language and the lush descriptions of the settings, whether it's Eden or coming down to the earth, or the societies that the first humans are building, to the actual interactions between the humans. So that was something that I really enjoyed, and I think is a kind of characteristic of the personality of the book. I think Adam feels...
It's our sexy Eve. It's our sexy Eve. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes,
it's our sexy Eve.
Yeah, it is. I think Eve is very sexy in this book. That's part of the reason I love the cover that Deep Vellum gave us, because I think the cover is evocative of that. I wanted to ask you before we start reading, I've been translating a different book of yours this past week, The Complot de los Románticos, and there are some passages in there that I can see that whether it was conscious or subconscious, I'm not sure, you were already thinking about Eve back when you were writing that in 2007 or 2008. And I wanted to ask you, you don't have to answer now, you can answer after the reading, if you prefer, how long you think you've been cooking this book in your brain and your subconscious?
Oh, I love that question. Honestly, I think that all books are cooked since ever by an author. I think the major oven, if we can use that metaphor, is childhood. And I do think that that's our coffer of treasures. Not that we are going to necessarily be writing about childhood. I did it, as many other authors do, with my first 2-3 books. I went back to my childhood because that is a paradise, and for a writer is a paradise. And it's a paradise. Then I didn't really understood why I had this fascination for childhood. But I have thought, and that is something recent, I have understood that really as our sensibility is forged in our childhood, that moment when we enter ourselves, our conscience, that has many layers, is not a moment of illumination and that's it, but it irradiates such a peculiar light that is very attractive, possibly also sexy in a different way than our Eve, because our Eve is sexy like an adult. She has a sexy maturity, to say so. But as the joy of living and the joy of understanding even our pain and even feeling our pain, all that is forged in childhood. Now, obviously, as a child in a very Catholic family, I heard zillion times talk about Eve, but it was not because they talked about Eve. It's many things are forged there. Now, the idea of writing a novel about Eve, I never had it before. It never crossed my mind. When I decided to write a novel about Eve, because first I wanted to do something a little bit more complicated that was and was not a novel. But when I decided, was not because I really decided it, but Eve started talking to me. The character started talking to me. And I even fought against it, thinking, are you kidding? This cannot be. This cannot be. So I don't think it was that. Also, I think that we authors, we continue with our same devils, ghosts, shadows. We work always with the same material, as we always work with that precious material of childhood, that, by the way, kind of burns itself in many ways. I remember when I had already finished novel number 2, that I told myself, don't remember anything, because when you remember it, you don't feel the same. Obviously, I'm not saying remembering only the anecdote, I'm remembering living through it. So I didn't want to go back there because I felt that it was like burning grass. Like I went back and it didn't feel the same. And it still happens to me. Something evokes my Madeleine, something evokes a passage I had kind of forgotten. And the pleasure is not the word, the intensity that comes from it is a state of grace. When you remember something of the past, a state of grace, oh, and I have it sometimes, but when I was young, I had it very frequently of that. What I have acquired through the years is I reinforce my vice for writing, and I really reinforce my vice for reading and thinking about authors, because reading obviously is not only passing the pages. Reading is then returning to them, thinking about them again. And that has become for me voluptuous. There's something there that I even feel now, when I'm about to be 70 this year, I'm going to be 69. I feel I shouldn't ever read a new book. I should be all the time reading books I've read. But no, obviously it's ridiculous. I read a new book and I also feel all this emotion. And then I read another new book and whoa, and I am looking forward for the moment where I am going to reread them, digest them, think about them, bring them into part of my life. Now, if in that second part, I think it was partially because those women authors that have been haunting me of my tradition, when I guess 12 years ago, I started this project of writing for me, women's more than 15 years, I think, writing a canon where only women were there. I don't know exactly if it was 12. I remember I gave a lecture at the Library of Congress with that theme, not very thorough because it was short time, it had to be spoken. So I did something a little bit humorous, it had to be something short, 40 minutes, 35 minutes. But I've been obsessed by that. I've done my kind of pieces of art. I do my art books. I've given courses. I want one day to finish that book that I never finished because I want to do literary portraits of all of them if I ever finish it. But in between, I reread them and I have this obsession. And many of them talked about Eve. And they were after me. So that's how I think Eve, yes, the things I heard as a child. But when I was writing Complot, I was in another planet. I was thinking about Dante, which might be in the title in English, Dante Hits the Road. I was thinking about him, and I was thinking about my neighborhood here in Brooklyn, and my city in Mexico City, and the history of my city, and downtown my city, and then I was thinking about the border, that was by then already horrendous, not the nightmare that is today. So we haven't read anything, but I had to answer that question because it was too good and I was not going to let it wither.
Well, I think we're very lucky that you have the vices that you have. So let's give the readers a taste of the Book of Eve.
Okay, we are going to try something today. We decided just before this reading, I'm going to read only some lines in Spanish. So please, dearest audience that we don't see, but we feel you are with us. And those that will listen to this in the future, if they do, don't tremble. I'm going to read just that you listen to it, you have a little taste. This is from Part 8. El Edén era un estar en ninguna parte. Sin tiempo no hay espacio. Apenas cruzar el umbral, estábamos en la cúspide del pico en extremo empinado del monte divino. A nuestros pies se extendía la inmensidad de la tierra. La vista era sublime.
8. The sight of earth. Being in Eden was like being nowhere. Without time, there is no space. When we crossed the threshold, we were at the peak of the divine mount. The immensity of earth spread at our feet. The view was sublime. Our eyes perceived. The sun began to disappear on the horizon, to hide itself as if it too had felt naked for the first time. The sky was tinged with vibrant colors. The skin of the globe came alive in different colors: greens, grays, blues, magentas, violets, golds. The seas, the rivers, the mountains, everything on earth glowed. If I had been at all prepared for this sight, perhaps I would have thought, now this is a universe. It's not drenched in blood from skinning animals, and thunder doesn't rumble down from on high. We fell and we were reminded of Eden by the stink of the stiff, heavy skins and the rough, sticky patches of dried blood on them, which caked onto our skin. Eden's insipid blandness had been altered by Thunder's crime against the animals, which literally stuck to us, much to our chagrin. The comparison between Eden and Earth became inevitable. We had arrived in paradise.
Okay, that's our first small portion we're going to read. We're going to skip a part and we're going to go to portion 9. Let's do it immediately, Sam, because we have eaten a lot of time.
Yes.
Maybe because today I'm in a diet only of liquids and I needed to eat something. So I'm eating time. So 9, and let me do the same. I'm going to read only the first lines, very few lines. Unless if somebody has an objection, send it in Q and A's, and I won't read anything more in Spanish. And Rachel will let us know, please don't read in Spanish. But for the moment, nunca he vuelto a ver un lugar así. Habíamos caído en el estrecho paso que mediaba entre dos imponentes lagunas borboteantes y sonoras en la terraza trazada con arbitrario pulso, sin rastro de dobleces o irregularidades que son tan de la tierra.
The first ridge. I have not laid eyes on such a place ever since. We had landed on a narrow stretch of land between two breathtaking, loudly bubbling lakes on a ridge that looked like it had been designed impulsively by a steady hand, with no trace of the undulations or irregularities so commonplace on Earth. One of the two lakes was red, tinged by the color of the fiery sky. The other was dark lava. Both boiled away. We had fallen on the stretch of black sand between the two lakes. It was 4 steps wide, and like the lakes, was about 3 or 4 times that long. At the edge of the ridge, on the banks of the two lakes, the world awaited, illuminated by the mocking, amber-colored light of the setting sun. The two lakes roared nonstop, 2 living monsters. Their waters made waves, eddies, whirlpools, and waterspouts. The distinct borders of the lakes looked unlikely to contain them. Today, the oceans continued to behave in this same manner, stubborn, forceful, just like those bodies of liquid I saw on that ridge. I saw fear in Adam's eyes, fear of the 2 threatening fiery pools of liquid that flanked the narrow piece of ground we were resting on. Fear of the wide, glittering world at our feet, and fear of the vibrantly colored sky. He grasped my arm firmly. The 2 thick hides we were wearing still separated us, but I could feel him holding on to me nervously. Adam turned around. I didn't resist. I was curious to see what the place we had just left behind was like, because we had been in such a hurry that I had seen only the coarse black sand that had slid down the slope with us.
Thank you, Samantha. You know, I spent yesterday night watching the Popocatépetl, the volcano I always saw when I was a child. Going to school, we had to cross a little bridge coming out of our neighborhood, and there was the Popocatépetl all the mornings looking at me. And it's been always in my imaginary, always in my life, is part of my body, is something I adore. And now he's misbehaving. I mean, misbehaving really is causing trouble to the people. I have been in Mexico when it misbehaved. I used to live in an apartment that I could look at the volcano, and I saw the little flame when it happened and the fumes when it came. Was then very little from the place I lived. It wasn't as when I was a child that I saw it much bigger. So I just couldn't, as I knew it was in trouble, I had to wake up for other reasons. I had told myself, ignore it, but I could not ignore it. So I'm very sorry. This has nothing to do with the novel in theory, but in reality has a lot to do with the novel. And I took several images of the video, and I was totally just like feeling, oh gosh, the earth is something so alive and is so impressive and so powerful. And of course, I say that because I don't live in the border of the volcano. I say, and it's so beautiful. And it roars and it makes figures with its smoke, and it's incredible. So, and the lava in the night that is like fire coming out, the rocks that it throws, well, was wonderful. And even though I was not, I was a city person as a child, but I think it was partially that incredible volcano, more than the short trips with my uncle Gustavo, who loved to take us away in the highways and then walk in the wild, and those other times of Mexico where you could do those things. We had lunches, sitting picnics, sitting I don't know where, and we had so many adventures in a horse, in a this and the other, but it was not really what because that was so close to me. That was also a kind of home. But the presence of the volcano, I think it's in the book, because Eve, sees this power. And instead of feeling frightened as Adam does, she feels an immense desire to be there. And then, of course, to work with it, she's the creator of the ceramics. I'm not going to be telling you all the novel, but she dialogues with the elements of the earth and art. Well, the fire is another thing. She steals the fire, not him. So it's a new myth of Eve, and also a new myth of stealing the fire.
I love that, Carmen. It's a fantastic demonstration of what you just described, of the childhood being the cradle of writing.
Yes, childhood is the oven.
Yeah,
the cradle is more novel, though the cradle, it also has like the title of a horror movie. When he said like that, I know I have my children and I have them in cradles, and that was not horror. That was another wonderful adventure that Eve also enjoys.
Yeah.
She enjoys maternity. So I think we have done our half an hour, Samantha.
We have, but I think we should end with the sexy part.
Okay, please. It's your part. I'm not going to.
You don't want to read any of the Spanish, even the first few lines, because I think it's nice to have the sound of the Spanish.
Yeah, now I lost me.
It's page 57, chapter 10, The Guardian Angel and Fire. I know I shouldn't call it.
Yes, it's right here. Cara al Edén, Adán quería que regresásemos. Intentó avanzar. Lo retuve para observar el negro pico de laderas casi verticales por el que habíamos descendido resbalando. En su punta, sostenido del aire, resguardando el acceso al Edén, un ser de hermosura indescriptible, hecho de brillante polvareda blanca, resplandecía con difracciones luminosas de diferentes tintes. Era de forma similar a la nuestra. Llevaba en la mano lumbre viva. Su olor era también exquisito y también complejo.
10. The Guardian Angel and Fire. When he saw Eden, Adam wanted to go back. He took a step. I stopped him and pointed at the black peak with nearly vertical slopes we had just slid down. At its zenith, an unspeakably beautiful being made of bright white dust floated mid-air, shimmering with luminous reflected light, guarding the entrance to Eden. Its shape was similar to ours. It held a live flame in its hand. Its scent was complex and exquisite too. When it saw me looking, it waved its arm, its fire. Led by Adam, we approached the steep slopes of black sand that led to the entrance to Eden. Adam wanted to scale that sandy peak and return to the land of thunder, an absurd idea because unless we could fly, it would have been impossible to scale that rough, nearly vertical peak we had just descended, slipping and falling. There was nothing to grasp onto to scale its heights. I let myself be guided by this frightened man because I wanted to touch the angel. But then Adam noticed the guardian angel. The sight hit him hard. A groan escaped from his mouth. It wasn't so much the sound of the fear in his eyes or in his hand grabbing my arm. There was awe in his groan, and for good reason. The brilliance of the angel's body was breathtakingly beautiful. Adam tried to take a step back, but I pulled him forward. I wanted to touch the angel, to feel its body of light. Angel, apple, temptation.
That end is in Spanish. Adán quiso dar un paso atrás. Yo tiré de él y avancé. Quería tocar el ángel, palpar su cuerpo de luz. Ángel, manzana, tentación.
Perfect. So maybe we can invite you back, Rachel.
Yes, hello.
Hello,
We do
Rachel.
have some audience questions that have come in already, but audience, if you have other questions for our guest this evening, please type them into the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen, and I will pose them for you. First up is one that came from Linda asking, how has Catholicism or other religious traditions influenced you in writing this book?
Well, evidently, thank you, Linda, for that question. Evidently, my parents were too Catholic. Everything was Catholic. Every time when we sat at the table, we prayed at the table, we sang at the table. During some time, I went to Mass daily. We were for a year, when I was 7 years old, 1 year missionary family in an Indian town in Mexico. So it was like the center of our life. And then I went to a non-school, and before that I had gone to another religious school, Opus Dei, not so wonderful like the nuns at the Ursulines at my school, that I saw them also being transformed by the movement inside the church. And some of them even left the convent, others not, but they already had college. They were something. Most of them, they were women. They had their lives, their ideas. One was a terrific reader. I read with her Wuthering Heights, and we had obviously daily religion class. So it would be for me unavoidable to not be in that cultural universe. It's a cultural universe. I am not a religious person. I not at all. I don't have it. I had my doses, but evidently the doses, I don't know how you pronounce la dosis, shaped a lot of my sensibility, as of many writers in Spanish, because religions are not something that is apart from the rest of life. Mainly the Catholic religion that didn't tolerate the idea of other beliefs. So it created, in many ways, created the culture in which I was raised. I say in many ways because I am Mexican, and because our Virgin, our first apparition in Mexico, happened in a place where they went to adore former goddesses, and because her own self is between an ancient Mesoamerican goddess and the Virgin, and she's a complex figure. She has the both things. So yes, I am Mexican. I'm possibly more shaped by that, but I'm shaped by that, and I insist. Let's say I'm an atheist Catholic, in the way that I know how much it shaped me. I'm married to an atheist Jewish, and I know he's very different, but I know we both are Mediterraneans. So as I have friends of other religions, and I know, and it's not that we talk about it, but I feel it. It leaves an imprint. Now, this book is, I think it would have been not written by somebody that hadn't gone through all that. Training is the word, but it's not. The word is not training, all that life. And also I have seen, and it doesn't make me happy because it's not what authors want, but I have seen it has caused some irritation in those that really are intolerant and want the version of the facts that were dictated by then the Vatican, it's exactly when one of the authors I worship more was founding her own convents, Teresa de Avila. She's a terrific writer. She's a saint in theory. She was never sure it was God who called her or the devil. She lived in that fear. And I see the paintings of that council where they declare the version of Eve is the version we have, because there are many other versions of Eve, previous ones that are very different. And I see that the ones who took the decision that was the truth are only males, only the bishops and the archbishops and the pope. They all have skirts, but skirts do them no good. They are all males there. And they decided that the first woman was that person without voice, without energy, without sexless, yes, and pretty stupid, and with no destiny of her own. She was just going to be per secula seculorum, a little pinch of the rib of her partner. I am no rib. And that doesn't make me a non-Mexican. That doesn't make me the other way around. I think Mexico has a tradition of women that have lived a life of their own. The room of their own is more complicated. You need money. But a life of their own, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question is actually for both of you, and it came from Anna, and she wants to know, how does the translation process work for the two of you? Do you work together at all? Are you completely separate? How does that happen?
Do you want me to start, Carmen, or do you?
No, you have to answer, not me.
So the first part of the novel is always the hardest, and I have to work a lot on trying to get the tone correct. And then I send some pages to Carmen, and she looks at them and says, yes, I'm happy with this, or make these tweaks. But that's just to get a sense if I'm going on the right track. And then in the case of this novel, I just very steadily did about 1,000 words a day until the translation was done. And if I came across issues along the way, for example, if I had questions about some of the capitalizations of the characters that are capitalized in the original text, then I would check in with Carmen occasionally, but I try not to bother you too much, Carmen, because I know that you're busy working on a million different things at one time. So then at the end, we go back and forth on any final questions. Sometimes I find things that occasionally make Carmen want to actually modify the text. We had one of those in this, do you remember? So,
I hope you encounter several ones at Complot. I like the idea. You open a space there of doing little switches and changes.
Yeah, and I think that to some degree, all translators are editors. You can't be a good translator without being an editor in that sense. I think you have to think about the text in its context of the culture it's coming from, but you also have to think about the text in the context of the receiving culture and just think about it. But then you have to maybe make some decisions or discuss with the author if there's anything you think would be confusing or diminish the appreciation of the text in the receiving culture. Are there things that need to be clarified? Are there things that might be left out? There's all kinds of possibilities. And I'm very grateful to you, Carmen, for being so available when it comes to time to have those conversations.
Sam, let's be honest. I'm like this, not very available. I try. I love the process. I do think that a translator is a writer, and I enjoy the questions and the answers. And sometimes I get distracted because I'm writing something new. And some other times I try not to get distracted, or I always try not to be distracted, out of respect of another writer that is a translator that has some doubts. Sometimes I ask questions to friends or to books about something I'm writing very frequently. And I need the answers because writing is difficult and you need to have all the answers there to continue writing, not to be stopped or etc. I think it's a thing. I have here in a private chat comment a suggestion that maybe has heard I do think there's something environmentalist in the book, because when we learn in the traditional version that we left the Eden and we were sent to Earth, that means Earth is a punishment, and that means Earth is not ours, and in reality we are Edenites. But in this novel, we are not Edenites, we are Earth beings, and we need to change our attitude to the Earth. We are in the front of a catastrophe. It's already happening. How many millions of people have had to leave their place because they have no water, because they can no longer use the ground, because their space has been inundated or erased because we have done it terribly. A relationship with the earth has been the relationship of Edenites that suddenly appear in a place that's not their own, and they can just dump their garbage and run away. But I don't think we are going to run away that easily. Maybe Mr. Musk is going to run away, and then who knows what will happen to him if his thing is going to explode in the way out. I say think because I don't know if it'll then be in something round or something what, if it'll explode and he won't make it, or if he'll take some pills that will make him sleep some centuries of years till he arrives to another planet and live happily ever after as another Edenite, dumping garbage some other place. So the book has that, the novel has that attitude towards Earth. I personally hadn't thought of it nor noticed it really, but I was at the round table where somebody brought a paper, an essay written about the book, and he said this was a narco-feminist and green environmentalist. And I was just like listening, saying, what is he talking about? I said, oh, it's obvious. It's obvious. I mean, the attitude of the Edenites towards the earth has been criminal towards the earth and ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And that definitely was something that I was trying to carry through in the translation, the reverence for the planet, for the earth. And it's kind of homage to Earth in many passages, which are so beautiful. I just want to go back to one thing about the process, because I think it's important to acknowledge the role that editors play, and Carmen has worked with some really fabulous independent presses. Remember how wonderful it was to work with Lizzie Davis, and working with Serena at Deep Vellum, who edited this book, is an important part of the process. And I think it's probably, you know, if not as important, more important for translation, because different cultures have different cultures of translation. So it might be interesting, Carmen, for you to talk about, you know, what the difference is for you as an author between when you published the Book of Eve in Mexico and throughout the Spanish-speaking world, and the experience of publishing a book here in the United States.
It's totally different. We don't have, well, maybe now it's building more in the independent publishing houses, but we really don't have the tradition of the editor. When I started publishing at Ciruela in Spain, they did have a terrific editor. And there I published El Médico de los Piratas, I published La Virgen y el Violín, I have published with them 9 novels. And they used to have a very careful editor. Now they again have it, but there was a moment where they hadn't. But it's like an exception. The tradition in Spanish is the author is its own editor. And what we call an editor is all the other work. I mean, publishing a book is an enormous work. Viva Will Evans, we have to remember him always, and all his team. It's always a team of person. A book is a collective adventure. Oh, my daughter opened a play last week and she said, all the things that are done with collective effort are the best things on earth, she said, because she's an actress. I think that I wouldn't use the word best, but I do think it's important to underline the collective word of that is the editor, the team of the house, the printer, the publisher, the bookstores. It all has to be part of building a book, placing the book where it should be.
That actually leads me to a follow-up question, if I may, which is, what has the experience been in other cultures? Because I know your work has been translated into a lot of languages. Have you been involved at all in that process? What are those teams like, and how much are you able to connect with them?
Well, when I know the language, is wonderful. The other thing that I love, and I always try it to be the case, is to work with friends. But I never met my translator in Dutch to Dutch. I never had any communication. I never met yes, I met my translator in Chinese, but he didn't ask anything. And then when I opened, I couldn't know where to anything. But yes, I did meet him, terrific person. Italian, Marta Canfield is my friend. Nino Canucci, who translated my first into Italian and who recently translated a longish piece. I've read him as an author. So it becomes like really a part of the creative, a part of the writing world. I like that. My German, Susanne Lange, fantastic. Erna Pfeiffer, also in German, fantastic. So the good adventures are the adventures that provoke a friendship. Also, because that way the next book has it, knows more the author, more the translator. They are very different. The Germans ask a lot of questions. I had it with one novel at the same time it was being into English and into Italian, no, it was German. And the German was like the questions were boo, infinite, infinite, infinite. One translator went to visit the island where things happened with that novel. The other novels also were being translated, and the process is very different. It also responds to their way of thinking, their way of relating to language, and the way they think.
Wonderful, thank you. We are close to out of time, but I would like to close out with a great question that I got sent for Samantha. Samantha, you mentioned that you're working on another of Carmen's books, your third of hers. Are there things that you're just now starting to notice about her writing after this amount of time dedicated to studying it?
So we have worked together since 2006, Carmen. I think that's right. And in those years, I think I've translated probably every kind of genre, every kind of writing, a screenplay, reviews, criticism, and novels, poetry. And I think Carmen has a very distinctive voice, and that voice, which includes things like the cadence of her language and the rhythm, was very distinctive to me even after working together for a few years. So I agree with Carmen very much that when you have the ability to communicate with an author as a translator or vice versa, it can be a very enriching relationship that benefits not only the text, but also, you know, the translator author partnership, the individuals.
Thank you both so much. This has been a lovely evening. It's been a real treat to get to listen to you both, to get to hear you both read. Audience, thank you for being here. And you can order the Book of Eve at northshire.com and check out other upcoming events there as well. Thank you,
thank you, Rachel. Samantha, always a joy to be with you. Thanks, please, to Northshire's bookstore, all of it. And again, thanks to Will Evans, wherever he is now, our publisher.
You're here.
Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.